With Stage 2 of the Rush Festival starting in a few days, it might seem like the right time for a tier list. Alright, thank you for watching, see you all next time. Of course, seeing this image on its own offers no insight. It's only one person's opinions, and it might not even be right. Even I do not agree with the list I just gave you. However, I do believe it is a fairly accurate representation of the meta. When it comes to high-level events, Royal Rebels have as many top finishes as every other deck combined. However, it requires 3 copies of a UR from every single box in the game, making it a rare sight on the ladder. Instead, that field is dominated by Harpies, a deck that can be made viable with as little as 1 run through a single mini-box. From my personal experience, the best deck to be playing is Magnum Overlord. The skill means it almost never bricks on high-level monsters, and the state of the ladder leads to many players not having sufficient outs included in their decks. Not only can you win normally via cards like Seven Zone Magician, but also if you find yourself playing from behind, simply waiting until you draw the maximum will work way more than it should on ladder. As I said, there aren't nearly enough Rebel players ready to flip and destroy your entire board. Finally, Thunder is a deck that sees modest play, replacing Dark Arts of Celerity as the turn guy sideways deck that takes advantage of zero defense bosses and piercing damage. In tournaments, Thunder is probably the second most popular deck. In the third tier, we have a smattering of decks with some representation on ladder and in tournaments. All of these decks have one thing in common, and that is a way to high-roll the opponent, such as Dragonic Pressure, Triple Threat Thunder, or simply overrunning them with big guys. But if you look at this, see Royal Rebel on the top, and go, wow, tier 0 deck, I'm good to go. You're doing yourself a disservice. The last Rush Festival had a supposed tier 0 deck. It didn't win. The recent KC Cup had a tier 0 deck. It did not win. Finding the best deck, getting a YouTuber approved list, and jamming mirror matches will make it very difficult to increase your win rate above 50%. If you're good enough at the game, it's entirely possible to do quite well. But if you really want to succeed, there are other things you need to consider. Let's start by talking about trap cards. Back in December, Minibox #1 released, including the Barrier and Music Princess's Recital. These were incredible cards that nearly every deck could use to counter the opposing multi-strike Dragon Dragias. Barrier turned this matchup on its head, and not running it would be a huge mistake. Except, that's a complete lie. Play 5 games during Stage 2, and you realize that the only deck that matters is Dragonic Resonance, a deck consistently able to pop your back row and increase their monsters above level 8, turning off Recital as well. If you want any chance to stop Dragonic Resonance, you need to be running Phantom Bind. Resonance is by far the most popular deck, and the best deck in the room, and not running Phantom Bind is a huge mistake. But once again, I am lying to you. If we go check the lists used by the top 10 players, there isn't a single Phantom Bind in sight. But there are plenty of barriers. What happened? The simple answer is that the metagame developed. Some people believe this is an acronym for most effective tactics available, but that is incorrect. Meta is self-awareness, a knowledge of the game around you. Players use Dragonic Resonance and climb. Players realize they are fighting a bunch of Dragonic Resonance, but that those decks are no longer running Dragonic Pressure or Gravity Press Dragon, so they bring in Dark Arts of Celerity to freeze the opponent and win games. Players also bring Ancient Forces, which uses Clear Ice Dragon to clear away the Sports Dragons and Aquas and Beast Monsters and Currybot from the graveyards, preventing opponents from making their best plays, while also being able to destroy a ton of the boss monsters in the game. However, players see decks like Ancient Forces, and Dragias, a card that had completely fallen out of the meta, rams right back, destroying Dragonic Slayers and Clear Ice Dragons with their sub 2500 attack points, backed only by Phantom Bind, the card everyone felt they had to run. And when players realize they are losing to Dragias again, they bring barriers, stopping Dragias from clearing the board. But the aggro players don't stop there. They have Speedy Performer, Thunder the Thunder, and Silverwolf, all helping to bring the opponent down low enough that the barrier won't stop it. And with all of this going on, Maybe the Resonance deck sees Hammer Crush Deal is becoming popular, and it decides it wants as little to do with spell and trap cards as possible. In short, as you rise in the ranks, you begin encountering not just the best deck, but also the deck that beats the best deck, and also the deck that beats the deck that beats the best deck. Are any of these the most effective deck available? No. It entirely depends on what other people are playing. It depends on the game around you. It depends on the meta. So, how can we apply this knowledge? Royal Rebel is considered the deck to beat. If you're on Royal Rebel, you must think, how will you win the mirror? Perhaps you'll run Royal Rebel Fanatic over Descendant of Titans to prevent an opposing heavy metal from gaining attack when it uses its effect. Or maybe you'll choose not to play Royal Rebel at all. Maybe you'll bring a Magnum Overlord list filled with Music Princess's Recital. By ending your turn with just 2 monsters on board, you'll negate heavy metal's attack entirely, while also committing fewer cards to the field, preventing the Thunder matchup from gaining Piercing. But if you're on Thunder, you might see those Overlord players and want to stop them from OTKing you with the maximum monster. Recital isn't going to work, but you are a rare deck with no limit 3 cards. How helpful is Call of the Earthbound? As you ask the questions, know that there isn't a right answer. The metagame is going to shift, and it will continue to shift over and over as the weekend drags on. Is a Harpy player on Counter Pigeon, throwing, because their board is getting wiped and switch to defense? Or is it exactly the card they need to stop Dragius from overrunning them and winning a second festival in a row? We don't know. With this in mind, let's take another look at the tier list. The first thing you might notice is Dragius is ready to kill them all again. Aggro is a deck with almost no presence in the current meta. However, it has several things going for it. As we've mentioned, people aren't running cards like Counter Pigeons or Barrier, because so many of the skills provide enough of a debuff that those traps don't matter. So if there are no trap cards to stop you, Dragius' second attack is going to eat a ton of decks for breakfast. But now, you might look at this and see Rebels, Aggro, and Thunder are all decks that are very powerful and do pretty well into Harpies, so maybe they fall off, and maybe even Magnum Overlord does too. When this happens, the top 3 decks are all filled to the brim with exclusively level 7 and higher boss monsters, and that means once again Yami Ruler is here to prevent darkness from overwhelming all that is just. But that's not all. If Celerity is here to stop us from tribute summoning monsters, wouldn't it be really nice to have 7's Axel Road search out a boss monster for you? Or maybe it means it's time to start summoning level 5 and 6 monsters again. Or maybe you can use your skill to cheat something out onto the field. But wait a second, all of these decks are running boss monsters with low defense. Could Ancient Forces come in and be the deck to beat them all? Maybe, maybe not. Let's finish by cleaning up the list. But at best, this is only my predictions. As we said, Rebels are the deck to beat. That doesn't mean it's going to be the best deck, or even the one you should bring. But you should expect it to see a lot of representation, even by very high-level players. Then, when it comes to sheer adaptability, you cannot discount Aggro. It doesn't see a ton of play currently, but this deck runs skills with no restrictions. You can use Hammer Crush Deal for extra consistency. You can run Legend Draw to have a built-in answer to any boss monster in the game, including a 50% shot of clearing maximums. You can run Life Point Gain to have 7,000, allowing you to survive 3 hits from a Royal Rebels invasion. You could even run Tornado Draw to search out Torna as an answer to the many zero defense boss monsters in the game. Thunder, a very consistent deck with the ability to really take advantage of these zero defense boss monsters in the meta. Magnum Overlord, a very consistent deck, which might be useful when you're trying to grind out hundreds of games in a short time span. Celerity, a meta-dependent counter pick, just like Ancient Forces. 7's Axel Road is able to search out 7's own Magician, but it seems on the surface that it should be weaker than a Magnum Overlord deck. However, they do have more versatility in the low-level monsters they are able to run, and perhaps that is enough to give them an edge and be worth playing. The C tier decks all have the same weakness, shield and sword. And the reason I am putting them so low is because Royal Rebels shares that same weakness. When the card that counters your deck is also the card that counters the best deck, you are going to see it a lot. And the things that make these decks unique are unfortunately probably not quite as strong as just playing Rebels. But all of them do have tricks, and perhaps players will be able to find a way to make something happen. And please keep in mind, this is not even every deck. Acebreaker isn't represented here, and it's a deck also able to clear monsters with ease. Prior to the last Rush Festival, nobody was playing aggro, and then it became the most popular deck for 3 months. There could be a deck out there that everyone is writing off that ends up taking the top spot. Let me know what you're planning on playing, and thank you for watching. Good luck, have fun.